Wealthsimple on the infrastructure team. Let's go the right way. There we go. I work for Wealthsimple. What we are, we're an online investment manager. We launched 4 years ago, almost exactly. In fact, we celebrate our 4-year birthday tomorrow. We combine digital tools and personal financial advice. Our mission is to make smart, easy, automated investing available to everyone. And by everyone, I really do mean everyone. If you want to invest for retirement or for education, anything for the future, you can sign up for an account, invest some money, answer some questions. It'll build a model portfolio for you, rebalance it. But you can also speak to a financial advisor if you want some advice on the future. So it's a bit of automation. It's a bit of kind of humanness, but there's no minimum account values. We just want everyone to be able to have the financial freedom that they want. I'm not going to talk about anything terribly novel about this platform today, though. Instead, what I like to talk about is IAM. If you use AWS, which I assume everyone in this room does, since we're at the AWS summit, you probably have IAM accounts. And I mean, this is the keys to production. It's kind of important to protect. So I'd like to talk about requiring MFA on IAM accounts. This should be one slide, but actually it's a bit more than that. It's not as trivial as it sounds. I'd like to talk about Pseudo Sudo access or Pseudo Sudo access. And then finally, I'd like to talk about how to make these policies stick. Because if you haven't discovered how to do the first 2 points yet, great. We're going to go through it together. If you've tried, though, if you're aware of these things, but you've tried them, only had like the principal developer come to you and say, this has ruined all my workflows, please roll it back. At the end, we're going to talk about a tool that can actually allow you to implement these policies and make them stick. And my hope is that after this talk, anybody who hasn't implemented these policies but also wants to implement the policies can. Like this is fairly simple stuff. This isn't anything too esoteric. All you need to know is where to look. So let's get in. MFA. There is no checkbox. If you've gone through the IAM user console, you're looking at setting your password requirements. You can set a lot of different requirements for complexity, number of characters. You can have over 9,000. There's no checkbox here, though, to require MFA. As it turns out, to require MFA is something actually handled by IAM. So something else that you may have done, actually, before stumbling on this is you may have created a read-only account for a user. You're an admin, you want to give somebody read-only access, maybe have them inspect EC2, RDS instances, but you don't want them to be able to mutate anything. So you give them a read-only account, and then they come visit you an hour later like, I can't turn on MFA, I can't change my password. Read-only accounts can't do these things. IAM change password, IAM enable MFA, these are write actions. So a read-only account can't do them. So you figure, somebody else must have figured this out already. I can't be the first person discovering this. You search for it, you find this article. You can see the title says, Users Self-Managed MFA Credentials. That sounds promising. And sure enough, there's many IAM policies in this article that will allow a user who otherwise only has read-only access to modify their own MFA token and change the password. But also has something else really cool in here. So I apologize. This was exported from Google Slides, so some of the amazing animations are missing, but you just have to pretend. Here's the policy. The statement ID is called block most access unless signed in with MFA. What does that do? Well, this is a deny policy, and if you're familiar with IAM, you know that most policies are allow. But when you have two policies that are allow an action and deny an action, the deny always takes precedent. So somebody could have a policy that says, allow various EC2 actions. If we have another policy that says deny EC2 everything, that deny is going to take precedent. And so the next part of this is we're not actually denying an action, we're denying a not action. We're into double negatives and we're not even halfway done. This statement ID says block most access unless signed in with MFA. So if you wanted to deny an action, everything except what you wanted to allow them to do, you're going to have to list out every single Amazon service out there. And they launch frequently. One is probably launched since I began this talk. So keeping that list up to date is going to be kind of difficult, and it's going to be a really long list. Not action is the inverse of that. We want to deny all actions except for the actions that we list here. And I haven't actually listed them because it is still quite long for this policy, but these are actions such as IAM reset password, IAM enable MFA device. We are denying all actions except the actions that a user might take to change the password or turn on MFA. What resource is that going to be on? It's going to be on all resources. And you know what? This deny policy will not apply to anybody who has MFA auth present. So when somebody logs into the console for the first time, they don't have MFA, they click on EC2, there's nothing there. The EC2 instances are gone. They look in RDS, there's nothing there. They think maybe they're in the wrong region. Go to something global like S3, nothing there. This is because this policy denies access to everything until they've turned on MFA. So I go, turn on MFA, log out, log in, and then whatever policies we grant them through their other policy attachments, now those take effect. If we allow them to see EC2 resources, they can see those now. Something that I've kind of hinted at, I apologize, there's a missing slide, but multi-factor auth present is not the same as multi-factor auth enabled. There's no such thing as multi-factor auth enabled. Multi-factor auth present is kind of a bit more nuanced than that, and that's why there's the log out, log in action. We're going to come back to that a little bit later in part 3, though. So Pseudo Sudo access. One of the first things you're supposed to do with a new AWS account is you're supposed to stop using the root account. You're supposed to turn on MFA on that, put in a fireproof vault, just throw away the key, maybe not in case of emergency, but otherwise create new IAM users that you will use to administer the account instead. Or actually do account federation, which is kind of its own thing. But one way or another, stop using that root account. You'll get the screen check mark saying, yes, you did that. But here's the thing. If you create all of your AWS admin accounts with the administrator access policy, you do not have a root account anymore. You have 3 root accounts or 4 root accounts or however many administrators you have at this point, which, you know, is, I don't want to criticize anyone for that. It's a brand new account. You need to provision users. You need to create resources. Even if you mean to be using something like CloudFormation or Terraform, you need to kind of set those up first. So, okay, of course we need administrator access. But what about after those things are set up? What about after we have CloudFormation? You know, well, I guess we still need admin access for firefighting. Something bad might happen. We might have to log in and do something, something drastic. But the thing is, if you take that approach, you don't need admin access all the time. You only need it some of the time. And certainly in Linux, we're not logging into machines with root credentials. We log in as ourselves, hopefully as ourselves if we have some kind of identity provider. We become root only when we need to. We don't log in as root or root equivalent. So instead of attaching the admin access policy, you can attach a policy that, that looks something like this. So ops sudo is not a real thing. That's a role that I'm going to walk through creating in a sec. But this is a policy statement that says STS assume role on this ARN ops sudo. So that means that whatever user this policy is attached to can assume a role, and that role can have additional privileges. So you might have an administrator user who has otherwise read-only access, maybe not even blanket read-only access, but read-only access only where they really need to go. And we can attach this policy to them so that in case of emergency, we can break the glass and they can level up. So how do we create that? We go to the IAM console, we go to roles, we create a role, we say it's another AWS account, but actually it's our AWS account, so we'll put the our account ID there. Look at that, require MFA, we found it. We found the checkbox. This is only for assuming roles, though. The first part is still for kind of requiring MFA blanketed. So anyway, we say, yes, we're going to create this role for our account ID. We're going to attach some policies to it. So if this ops sudo role is meant to be an administrator, we'll attach admin access. It doesn't have to be, though. If you have an RDS administrator, you can create a role for them that has a bunch of RDS access. Maybe it allows them to create databases, not destroy databases, restore snapshots. But whatever the case is, they're going to log in with kind of restricted access, and then if they kind of need to do something special, they'll assume this role. We'll give it a name. You probably want to give it a description, but up to you. When you're done, you'll get this screen. This link, when you click on it, it's actually going to throw something into your account badge at the top right. If this role were if this role were assigned to me and I were to click on that, when I pull down the drop-down menu, I'm going to get this. I'm going to be logged in as whatever limited privileges I have. But if I need to become a super admin, I can just click on ops sudo. I'm powered up now. When I'm done, I can switch back to my regular role, but this means that I'm not logging into the account as root. I don't have root privileges until I explicitly ask for them. This will kind of also drive adoption to something like CloudFormation or Terraform, because anytime you try to turn on an EC2 instance, it's going to throw an IAM error at you and say, you can't do this. You'll escalate to ops sudo maybe, or maybe you'll do it properly. This has further implications, by the way. If you run Terraform destroy and you just have blanket admin access, that might be production you're aimed at. I sure hope not. But if your access is default read-only, then Terraform destroy is just going to throw a bunch of angry errors at you. Production isn't going to go away. You'll have to explicitly assume that higher privileged role before you do anything bad. So these are both good policies. I guess we should implement them, but there's a problem. Let's say we have a user that has a read-only policy. They're allowed to escalate to a higher one, but they also have that MFA requirement, and so they run AWS S3 LS. Where are my buckets? Access denied. Like I said earlier, MFA present is not the same as MFA enabled. Just because they have enabled MFA does not mean that they're allowed to use the AWS CLI. Because, so you turn on MFA, you go to your IAM profile, you generate some AWS credentials. Those need to have multi-factor authentication on them too. Your access key and your secret key is only really single-factor authentication. When you add this policy that says MFA auth must be present, it must be present in API calls. So that's why you get that access denied. And the AWS CLI, it does have a built-in method where you can kind of have it prompt for an MFA token when you assume a role, but I don't want to assume a role right now. I just want it to always require MFA for every AWS API call I make. So one way you can get around that, we can say AWS STS session token. I can feed it my serial number ARN. I can feed it the one-time code, and it'll spit back some credentials. These are ephemeral credentials. I'll copy those to the clipboard. I'll re-export them as environment variables, and I'll get on with my life. That's kind of a pain. I guess you could write some Python or Ruby that would do that all automatically for you, but don't. AWS-vault. It's not made by us. It's made by a company called 99 Designs. I'm actually noticing that their logo is on that wall back there, so that's pretty cool. If you're here, great tool, thank you. AWS-vault, it does two things really well. The first thing that it does is it allows you to easily assume roles and ephemeral credentials, whether it's via MFA tokens or whether it's via role escalation. It just kind of makes handling that a lot easier, so you don't have to kind of do this dance with, I'm going to ask for a token, now re-export this thing. The other thing that it does that we really like, it's kind of in the name. It's in the word vault. I don't know if anyone else has some angst about your AWS API keys being essentially flat files in your home directory. And I know that nobody is doing that for production. I'm sure nobody in this audience is doing that. Like AWS Vault calls that out. It says, no, this is for development environments. But especially if you have production credentials on your laptop, you're probably a little bit uncomfortable about that being in your home directory. Sure, it's an encrypted laptop. You have to unlock it with your password. I'm sure there's no MDM tools on that could steal it. Nobody's running curl bash against scripts that will steal it. I don't know if anyone saw this a few months ago. There was a compromised node package that tried to steal things. Just having those credentials on your hard drive is a little bit scary. So anyway, this is a long way of saying the other thing that AWS Vault does is it puts your credentials somewhere else. In the case of macOS, it puts it in Keychain. It does work with other encrypted backends. I've not tested it with these other backends, but I'm sure it works. So you no longer have your credentials on a flat file. It's putting Keychain where it belongs. You don't have to configure AWS Vault. It already knows about your .aws config. Any option that you can use in your .aws config, AWS Vault can use that too. So you don't have to redo your config or relearn your config. It just works. Whether you want to assume an ephemeral session from an MFA token or assume an escalated role, I can handle that for you. And because it stores these secrets in an encrypted backend, once you get this set up, you can and should delete your AWS credentials file. That file with all of your secret keys in it, get rid of it. Vault does some other cool things. If you have a policy where you need to rotate your AWS access keys on a regular basis, that's kind of painful, you can just execute a command. It'll just do it for you. Or if you don't do that because it is painful to rotate your credentials, well, now you can. How you set this up, this is an example AWS config file. Again, there's nothing special in here for Vault itself. This is just the regular config file, but we tell it about our MFA token for the read-only profile. For the Pseudo profile, we tell it about that again. And we also say that this role can be assumed by the read-only role. And because we've now deleted our .aws credentials file, we say AWS add read-only. It's going to prompt us for our access key and secret key, and it's going to put those into keychain. And just in case anybody knows keychain really well, you probably know that macOS keychain, when you log in, it automatically unlocks your login and your local items keychain. So you're probably wondering, well, like, is that really much safer? AWS Vault creates its own keychain for you. This keychain locks itself every time you invoke. So while you probably shouldn't walk away from the computer after you've just done something, somebody can't just walk up to your computer and get your credentials. They need to know the password to unlock that keychain list. So anyway, credentials are in keychain. Let's do some stuff. We do AWS exec read-only -- AWS S3LS, prompts us for MFA token, and it works. It's our buckets. We can do AWS Vault exec ops sudo -- AWS S3 sync. This is a write action, so we're assuming the ops sudo role. It's not going to prompt for MFA if we have recently authed with read-only, because it tracks that session. That session is kept in keychain as well. If you've ever done ephemeral role escalation with the AWS built-in CLI, it caches that too. Puts it in your home folder. This will put it in keychain. So whenever you want to execute Vault again, it'll prompt you for that keychain password to unlock the Vault. But you don't have to keep entering your MFA token. You don't have to worry about that persisting somewhere. It doesn't even persist as environment variables. Going back to the example of this thing where we're first running AWS STS get session token. If I were to roll my own, which I definitely shouldn't, I would do something that would just export that ephemeral session as environment variables. That's not how Vault works, though. The environment variables are only there for what we invoke through this. They do not persist. Some kind of sidecar process can't just steal them. And in case you're worried about this breaking any additional workflows, I'm showing examples of saying, AWS exec read-only -- AWS CLI. But you can feed this to other things. If you have a Python script that uses Boto, Boto is aware of AWS environment variables. You can do AWS Vault exec read-only -- some kind of Python script. It'll work. You can fire up a Rails application with this. Like as long as the thing that you are running from Vault understands how to use those environment variables, it'll work. And this removes the friction of enabling MFA, which is going to kind of upset some people when they realize that they require that on every API call. It's going to allow you to have role escalation so you're not accidentally shooting yourself in the foot. Like if MFA is keeping the Bitcoin miners out of your account, role escalation is keeping you from accidentally deleting it. And with AWS Vault, you can tie these two things together in a really kind of frictionless way, and also stop having that angst about your credentials just being flat files. So that's pretty much all I've got. Thanks for having me. If you have any questions, I'm going to stick around for a little while. By the way, these are the reference material. AWS Vault, get it, use it, love it. It's the best. This is the second QR code is for how to require MFA on all of your accounts. The third one, because we kind of flew through it, this is how to have role escalation. Between the three of these things, these are some huge wins. If you accidentally check AWS access keys into a GitHub repo, it's probably not going to be the end of your business. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Byron, thank you very much. So we have time for maybe 2 quick questions. If you have a question, raise your hand. I will bring the microphone to you. The back.
Hi there. I'm just curious how the assume role works with CloudTrail, and how can you tell who did a various action, such as terraform destroy?
Good question. So the security team, Wealthsimple, they kind of manage that, so I probably can't provide you a good answer with that. CloudTrail will certainly track when somebody assumes a role. As for tracking who is executing stuff with that assumed role, I'm afraid I don't have a good answer to that. Probably the startup experts behind that wall would have a much better answer. So I apologize, but excellent question.
Second question.
So how exactly did this enable the break glass scenario? Can you go like through the steps? Because it looks like assuming a role is the same as being in that administrator group. Like, how is that different?
So good question. How is assume role different than being an admin? The difference is that you are not that by default. Like taking again Linux as the example, if I log into a Linux box as root and I go rmrf/, well, goodbye Linux box. I have to become root. I have to explicitly mean that I want to do that. I can't be just trying to demonstrate to somebody, look, it won't actually delete the file system because I'm not root. Oh, I am root. The Terraform example being another case, I've not encountered anybody that this has happened to, but I've certainly had this anxiety about, before something like Terraform or CloudFormation is in CI/CD, it's like, what if I run this command and just destroy production? It makes it so that you are explicit when you are assuming write privileges as opposed to read, because these profiles are all named. So if you're executing something from the CLI, be it or a Python script or anything else, like you have to tell it this is a profile for like hopefully not production, but let's say staging or development. You're not going to accidentally destroy an environment. As far as the console experience is, I will admit it's not that much difference. You're logging in without privileges, and then you click a button, and suddenly you have privileges again. But I can tell you from my experience, just having to do that extra 2-3 clicks really dissuades us from doing it. All of a sudden, we really want to get this stuff automated. We want to get it in Circle CI. I don't want to click buttons all day. I want a robot to do it for me.
Isn't that similar to what we do with sub-accounts? Like when you create a sub-account and then you make somebody an admin a sub-account, wouldn't that be like the same thing?
Sorry, I beg your pardon. I don't hear too well.
So isn't that the same like sub-accounts? Like when I create sub-accounts inside my account and then I have a sandbox account and I have an experimental account and a proof of concept account, and then you go through and assume role the same way, right?
I see. I mean, you can assume cross-account roles. That's not really what this is about. This is within a single account. Certainly, there's one best practice to have a so-called bastion account, which is what grants you access to all other things. I can advocate for that. I can account for federated privileges as opposed to even using IAM accounts. But I think for a lot of startups or anybody who's getting started with their first AWS account, this is a fantastic starting point that will get you miles ahead of everyone else. Oh, yes, I've been asked for the slides with the QR codes.
Get out of the way, too. One more question, maybe? Does anyone else have a question? No? Perfect. All right, guys.